and welcome to Let's Rap. Let's rise above personal perception. Okay, we're going to get straight into the meat and potatoes of this discussion today because today we're talking about what kind of relationships are we creating. So just a little house stuff first. We're asking you to please leave us any comments that you have in love and light. We're asking you to follow us on Facebook and like our Facebook page, and if there are any particular subjects or topics that you would like for us to talk about, please feel free to leave it in the comment section. Okay, let's get to it.
And please subscribe to YouTube channel.
Please subscribe to YouTube channel. What kind of relationships are we creating? Now, we're in a time right now where there seems to be a lot of up and downs, a lot of turmoil, a lot of tension, a lot of dissension, a lot of drama, a lot going on with regards to relationships. And I'm sure that a lot of people are wondering what's going on. You know, you often hear about Mercury being in retrograde, and poor Mercury gets blamed for a lot, so much of what's going on in relationships, but Mercury is always in retrograde. So if that's going to be the blame, then we're going to always have problems with relationships. But I don't think it necessarily has everything to do with Mercury. Yeah, there's a lot of different energies that sometimes tumble, get out of whack, go back and forth when the planets are doing their little shifting. But there's a lot of stuff, a lot of energy that we bring into certain relationships. And one of the first things I wanted to talk about today, Nye, is repeating of cycles. Because a lot of times you hear people talk about, you know, you just like my old boyfriend, or you just like my last husband, or, you know, you just like my last boss, or you just like my last friend, you know. And a lot of times I like to say that, you know, we put things on the outside of ourselves, but the common denominator in a lot of what's going on in these relationships is you, if you're having the issue over and over again. So are we repeating of cycles? And how do we pay attention to that to, number one, first determine whether or not it is a cycle that is being repeated, something that we really need to look into a little bit more deeper. And two, if we do determine that it is a cycle that's being repeated, how do we get in there and do the cleanup to rectify it so we don't experience the same thing over and over again?
This to me leads into our previous segment. Can we create our own reality, or how do we co-create our own reality? Mm-hmm. And one of the emphasis that we made during that segment was taking accountability, responsibility of action, and being brutally honest with ourselves about where we are, being in a place of observation and introspection, and being able to be very honest, but also to be able to be gentle enough to nudge ourselves to move forward, mm-hmm. taking the next step. We talked about Dr. Martin Luther King's concept about when you don't see the whole picture, taking the one step and trusting and having faith that that next step will lead you to the next step, that you don't need to see the whole staircase. And there's a lot of truth, there's a lot of methodology in that, a lot of formula in that we can use even in our personal relationships, and being able to evaluate the cyclical patterns that we tend to experience, like what you're mentioning. Before we can even go into the relational aspect, we have to look at how we're in relationship with ourselves. Mm-hmm. Because how we relate to ourselves will spill over into how we relate and interrelate with other people.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you said that too, because one of the things that I wanted to touch on as well with regards to this segment is, do you expect drama in your relationship? And if you're a person who tends to be very dramatic with yourself, everything is always a drama, everything is always an issue, it's an expectation sometimes without even realizing that it's an expectation. And so
it becomes an addiction.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's like, you know what's so funny? I'm at a place in my life right now where, you know, like I said in the last segment, I'm doing a lot of introspection with stuff. And, you know, what I hope people understand is that when things come up, keep coming up, they're coming up to be cleared. They're coming up to get your attention. Absolutely. And there was a time, I had to admit, you know, a couple of days ago, going back, there was a time when I think I really did expect drama in relationships. And it's almost like if drama wasn't going on, then there was something wrong. But at the stage where I'm at right now, I don't want no drama. I want peace. I want joy. I want love. And I realize even in my wanting that is something that I am responsible to pursue. in my relationship. That's whether it's with my spouse, whether it's with my children, because I find that also with my kids. I was, real disciplinarian when my children were growing up, because that's what I was trained
and conditioned to do.
That's what I was conditioned to. And it's like everything was a drama. I remember my children, sometimes when you listen to them, I'm like, man, I sound like I was a real abusive mother just listening to y'all. I'm grateful that we have such a close relationship. But I remember specifically, like, I always had nails, always had acrylic nails. And so one of my daughters in particular, when I was disciplining her, with a rod, she would jump like she was on a trampoline. I'm like, girl, you caused me to break my nail. It's gonna be, and I would get all worked up, and I would have to go into the room and really calm down. But I never was in a place at that time where I really searched myself, like, what is this all about? Why is it necessary to do all of this in order to discipline? And the place where I'm at right now, it's like I'm creating all that is peace and all that is drama-free. But a lot of times we really expect drama in relationships, and so that is what we in turn get in the relationship.
That's very important. Identifying that we can repeat cycles and patterns not only in our intimate relationships, but those behavioral patterns can actually spill over into our other relationships, like you mentioned with your children, things that we have encountered as children growing up ourselves, which is where I think you mentioned in one of the other segments that a lot of our forming, personality and, different character traits about ourselves are formed in our childhood, because that's when we are the most impressionable, many times, on an unconscious level. I think as adults, we develop that a little slower because we have blocks up and we've become accustomed to the world in a way that we've developed our own internal protective mechanisms, whether that be a drama as a protection or whether that just be the awareness of things that are coming into our space and our environment and our awareness. I think it's important to touch a little bit in understanding that this is not just, behavioral patterns are not just about the things that we do in a very abstract way, but there is something very physical, very tangible, I guess I should say, that is happening when we are developing these patterns. You mentioned, the creation of thought, and then thought becomes habits, and so forth. There's something happening in the brain while we become addicted to these patterns. We become accustomed to this. Now, a lot of us don't understand this, but on a medicinal aspect, on a medical level, we have neural pathways. And these neural pathways are, these are frequency centers, these are communicatives that happen on an energetic level. And, it's likened to a dense forest. When we initially go out into a forest that no one has walked in, or you see this path is all this grass, you're walking through the grass and you may even need a machete to go in and chop it down and give yourself a way. And so the new things that we introduce into our experience is going to be like walking through that dense forest. It's going to be difficult. You're going to have to make a way. The impression of that energy doesn't settle or resonate so easily. But the more we traverse that path, the more we go down that path, the wider it becomes. And you'll notice that there's a natural opening that becomes. And so the activation aspect of those neurons begin to fire. And then they actually create pathways for more, for this connectivity. Because there is a sacred network that is actually going on within our brains, a synaptic network, or they call synapses. And so that works very similarly to what's going on within the unified field of consciousness. So we have all these grids and all these webs and things that go on. So we have to be conscious that when we're choosing our thoughts, and like we spoke yesterday about the frequency of our words and whether we're bringing in purer words into our experience, that those things are creating pathways, which are becoming habits.
Habits, right, exactly. And when you were talking, that's what kept coming up to me, habits. And they say it takes 30 days to break a habit. So you have to consistently do something in order for it to be ingrained and become a natural way for you. So if you find that you, in the past, you were, treading a certain way, and it's not working for you anymore, you're not going to automatically be able to change that. But if you want something different, you have to do something different.
Exactly.
And in the doing something different, you have to be prepared that this might be something that you have to continually do. It's no different than when you're exercising, when you decide that you're going to take on this physical fitness regimen and your body is not used to that. So your body has been conditioned to sitting down on the couch and eating potato chips. So now you decided that you're going to get up and you're going to work muscles that you have not worked before. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be some struggle. There's going to be some strain. There's going to be some pain. But when you want something better, you proceed and you persist with that thing. And
Absolutely.
so it's the same thing with relationships. And, you know, like a lot of times in relationships, what I find, you know, in my counseling practice with couples, one of the major problems is communication. You know, you either have not taken the time to learn how to communicate with one another, and this is one of the downfalls that I feel with regards to, you know, premarital counseling. You know, this is something that really, really needs to be addressed, this communication thing, because a lot of times in relationships, you know, we don't know how to communicate. Like, you know, for example, when I was growing up as a child, you were told, you know, children are to be seen and not heard, so you're really not encouraged to communicate.
Or to develop that voice.
Right. For me, I used to ask why a lot. I was the why girl. You know, I always wanted an explanation. But my father always would say, why is a crooked letter? That was always his explanation. So, you know, you're not encouraged to ask the questions. You're not encouraged to have that back and forth communication. And then, so we get to a place where we really expect our minds to be read. And I think women are more guilty of that than our men. We expect our partner to just know what it is that we're thinking, to know what it is that we want. But that's not really fair to the other person, because if you don't say what you want, like the scripture says, we have not because we ask not.
Right.
If you don't say what you want, how do you expect to get it? So how do we bridge that gap in communication that really seems to be huge in a lot of relationships?
Well, the answer is not an easy one. It's not a very simple answer, because the truth of the matter is many of us get into relationships that we are not ready for. We jump into relationships and we treat relationships like a trinket store, you know, a dime store trinket. You know, it's something to do. It's the fad. It's the next best thing. But then we don't value the opportunity that's in relationship. We have gotten away from being taught. A lot of times our parents are not grooming us in the same ways, or our mentors, our spiritual mentors, our village mentors. It takes a village to raise a child, yet we've gotten away from that. There's a lot of isolation. We were talking in our last segment about in Lakesh, I am another you, the extension of ourselves. We're not holding to the truth of those principles. We've abandoned that. How is that directly affecting our relationships? It is impacting it in a very negative aspect, because people are, that's not my business. You know, that's their house. That's not this house. And there's not a lot of unity. There's not a lot of community happening. Community relations.
Yeah, I think too, one of the issues or the challenges is people come into these relational commitments, relational contracts, and they really don't know what they're coming together for. So it's like, what is the purpose of us coming together? Okay, yeah, you good looking, you fine, you make my body tingle, you make me feel good when I'm with you. But where do we go beyond that? Because, you know, that's going to facilitate you for a while. But after that, you know, when you lose your job, or he loses his job, or you have a child who dies, or you have this major catastrophe that happens in your life, house burns down, you know, all these challenges, then what happens? How do you come together then? And then what are we doing together, or why are we together on a spiritual level? Why are we together on a soul level? What are we coming together for? And I think we're at this place now in our journey, our evolutionary journey, where we really need to know and understand why we're doing what we're doing. So why are we entering into these relationships Do you know that you have a soul contract with this person? Do you honor that soul contract with this person? And one of the downfalls that I see with a lot of specifically marital relationships is a lot of people go into it with this. Well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just get a divorce.